Today, we are on week 6, and we will begin with, I want to touch on a few things that we left off in our last section, and then we'll move on to archaeology, a little bit about the temptation seals, and then jump back into a summary review of various chapters. What I wanted to touch on are slides, what is it? 101 and 102, where you have Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 through 15, referring to Lucifer. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to earth, and you have once laid low the nations. Why? Because you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of the assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. By the way, you can't make yourself like the Most High. He is the Most High. He is the most perfect. And so that's impossible. Verse 15, but you are brought down to the grave, to the depths of the pit. You know, this is completely the heart of a ego-psychomaniac. He is out to seek and destroy, and we need to keep that in mind. Again, if he can have that type of persuasion in the abode, in the heavenly realms, and persuade 1/3 of good angels to follow him as the leader of his rebellion, that's pretty powerful. But that doesn't make him all-powerful or omnipotent. You know, and looking at this verse 13, I will ascend to heaven, etc. And then where he says in verse 14, I will make myself like the Most High. Here's an interesting argument. This is not in my notes. It's what we call the argument from perfection. I've had various thinkers come up to me, you know, trained apologists, that are just sort of like asking me behind closed doors, why couldn't there be two gods? Meaning they believe that there is only one God, but they want like a good argument why it would be impossible for there to be two gods that coexist. Now, when we talk about the Trinity, we're talking about that there's one what, ontological what. Ontology is the study of being. You know, what is a fetus? What is a small-scale human baby all about? Ontologically, it's human. What are angels made of? Ontologically, what are they? What type of a being are they? What type of a being is God? Ontologically, he is spirit. So that's what we talk about when we refer to ontology. Ontos in Greek means being. And ology is, of course, study of being. So ontologically, God is triune in nature, not three gods, three persons that share ontologically the sameness of the divine nature. So one ontological what that consists of three whoms, which are persons. Now, having said that, think of perfection. Just think of the word perfection. Do you see anything in this world that's perfect? No, everything around us is imperfect and fallen or cursed. So where am I getting at now? Where it says at the end of verse 14, I will make myself like the Most High. Or think about Mormons who believe in, you know, polytheism, or the ancient Eastern, Far East religions, where they believe in polytheism, that there are many. Remember, there's polytheism and then pantheism, which means all is God, God is all. The table is God, the birds are God, you're part of the divine nature of the pantheos. So pan means all, poly means many, and mono means one. So we're monotheists. So could there now be, setting aside the Trinity, which is not the idea that there are three gods, that would make us tritheists and not monotheists. And that's, of course, what various Jews and Islamic thinkers accuse us of being. But that's not the case. We're not tritheists. So having said that, could there be another perfect being? Could Lucifer make himself like the Most High? Well, he could try to make himself like the Most High, but he'll never achieve it, nor will a good Mormon in Utah. So having said that, when we think of the word perfection, or the attribute or characteristic of perfection, we would say that God is the most perfect. I believe that there are degrees of perfection. And that may sound strange to you. After all, what's perfect is perfect, and what's imperfect is less than perfect. But let's put it this way. God made Adam and Eve. They were perfect. But they weren't perfect like God is perfect. He made the perfect home, Garden of Eden. Now, the Garden of Eden is an inanimate object. It doesn't think, it doesn't have a soul. It's a garden, right? But it was perfect too. Number 3, he made Lucifer, who was perfect. But we can't deduce based on that the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, and Lucifer, though they were created perfect, are perfect like God. That's impossible. So he is the most perfect. So having said that, there seems to be degrees of perfection. All right? Now, if that's the case, then we have to ask ourselves, since we don't see anything imperfect around us, perfect around us, we see imperfection, but that presupposes that we have an idea of perfection. Where is that? It must be outside of this finite world, outside of ourselves, and that would be the Most High God, who is the most perfect. All right, so having said that, when C.S. Lewis says you won't recognize, I'm paraphrasing, what's crooked unless you have an idea of straightness. Same thing there. Everything's crooked in the world, but yet, how can you judge what's crooked unless you have a standard of what's straight in your mind? And of course, you can apply that to the moral argument for God. We have an idea of what's absolutely, objectively correct and morally justified. Therefore, we know what moral abominations are. Having said that, the same thing can be applied to perfection. We see imperfection. And the only way you can judge imperfection or have an idea what that entails would be to presuppose some standard of perfection, and that would be God. So could there be two gods that are equally perfect? No. One would have to be more perfect than the other. Absolute perfection. If God was able to create another God, would that second God be his equal? No. Because the second God, though lesser in perfection, say like Lucifer and the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve, having said that, would still be less perfect than the most perfect, because the most perfect God, who created the second God, if that was even doable, would be less perfect than the first one. So you can't have two equally perfect beings, gods. Secondly, that second being, that second God, if God decided or tried to create a second God, would of course be contingent or dependent on his existence. He wouldn't be self-existent like God is, in the sense that God is everlasting. So anyway, take that as a side note, just looking at verse 14, I will make myself like the Most High. It's impossible, you can't. And then, of course, in addition to Isaiah 14, you have Ephesians 6, verses 10 through 18, where Paul gets into some hardcore angelology and demonology. And when you look at Ephesians 6, it's one of those things where if he would have developed this even more, say the entire letter to the church at Ephesus was all about demonology, I think people would be more alarmed about the spiritual realm and perhaps even frightened. So these verses are very important, where he says in verse 10, finally, the exhortation, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Verse 11, put on the full armor, not partial armor, put on the full armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the devil's schemes, or the vials of the devil, so they say. Another translation, verse 12, because our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And then, of course, in verse 13, you have the word therefore. That's a conclusion marker. It says, therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that you, not if, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand, stand firm then, with a belt of truth buckled around your waist, truth, with a breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one, which is Satan. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the saints. And of course, you're a saint, I'm a saint. It's not just a special person like Mother Teresa being labeled a saint. All believers are saints, and so forth. Now, I studied exorcism and Satanism in Rome at a Vatican-affiliated university. I just felt the need to go over there and jump into their distinctions. It was very interesting. Did a semester there in a short module. And I have a book coming out on spiritual warfare. Very, very interesting stuff. So we might touch on that a little later when we get to, well, we'll see. Probably not in this course. But having said that, know this. The majority of believers throughout the world actually believe that Christians can be demon-possessed. I don't believe that, all right? I don't believe that. Catholics believe it, the Orthodox Church believe it, and of course the minority, which is the Protestants, because we protest, so to speak, we believe in two main distinctions, which would be demon possession, which we would say, well, that can't happen to a believer because the Holy Spirit resides within us, and the Holy Spirit's not going to be, a roommate with a demon or Satan himself. And then there's demon oppression, being oppressed, waking up at midnight and your bed is being shaken, or you feel like something's grabbing your ankles, moving you in bed, and so forth. That would be being oppressed. So demonic oppression can happen. You saw that to Job, to his family, and so forth. Interestingly, thinking about Job, Satan can't call down fire from heaven and so forth on his own. Nothing escapes the eyes of the Lord, if you will. Everything is under his authority. So God had to give him the yes to do that, burn down the house and all these things. That's a mind twister when you start thinking about it. Why? In any event, moving on, I will share hopefully more on oppression and possession and other distinctions that are made. For example, if you see a chandelier moving, that's not oppression, it's not possession. What do you call it? If you open kitchen cabinet doors and china starts flying out of the wall, well, china is a inanimate object. Take a coffee cup. How could that fly into the wall by itself? Well, those are called different things that we don't have time to, at least not in this session. All right, 103, slide 103, Bible archaeology. Is there any archaeological confirmation to some of these biblical accounts? Does modern archaeology confirm or disprove the narratives in the Judeo-Christian scriptures? We're going to jump into history to find out a little bit. We will start with the book of Genesis and its supporting date, as early as 2100 BC, 4,000 years ago roughly, and then I'm not going to move all the way up to 70 AD. I have that's for Bible and archaeology classes, but let's jump into what we've talked about a little bit so far and so forth. There is the temptation story again in Eden in Genesis 2. There was a temptation seal discovered where you see a serpent and a tree and two human beings. You also see the two rivers that existed in Eden. I mentioned that earlier, and you have slides of a picture there. So the temptation seal, you have a picture of that in slide 105. If you pull that up now, you see the serpent to the left, and then you see human figure, and then a tree, a human figure to the right, and that's about 4,000 years ago. Very, very impressive. That tells me that the story was circulating early. So let's see. We got more archaeology coming up. Let's move on to Genesis 3, verses 3 through 9, where the serpent is, of course, tempting Eve. She's the one that was deceived. Adam wasn't. And what can we deduce on that? Well, note, you will not die does not mean drop dead immediately. It rather refers to the physical age or death having begun for Adam and Eve. Spiritually, of course, they died too. So when he says, you will not surely die, and then, of course, the Lord says that they were to die. Well, they're progressing toward death, just like the universe is. So the entire planet was cursed. The entire universe was cursed, and it's groaning for redemption. Bullet 2 on slide 107, since the day of the fall of humanity, at that very moment, Adam and Eve exercised their perfect gift of free will. They exercised that gift wrongly, and their offspring has been in need of redemption, and that includes you and I. This is why Jesus told the rabbi Nicodemus that he had to be born again, born from above, born of the Holy Spirit. Now notice here that Satan's tactic. He is suggesting that God is abusing Eve. You know, there's a divine abuse going on, as in the first denial of human rights. You know, God is withholding something from you. Satan attempts to make God into a sinister and an unfair monster. Well, we see atheists do the same thing. Then Satan questions the Word of God. Has God really said? Has God said? In turn, he denies the truth about what God has said. The opposite, you will not surely die. Yet that's what happened, so he was proven wrong. Interestingly, the whole idea about you will be like God was precisely what was in Lucifer's heart, and that's what caused him to fall. So he's trying to push the same idea, you will be like God, just like this ego psychomaniac wanted to be like God and set his throne above the stars of heaven. He's pushing the same message to Eve, and nothing has changed, you know. You see this in the world of Spiritism. You see it in the world of polytheism. You see in the world of Western polytheism here in the States, up in Utah. Mormons believe this all the time. So, in my view, they bought the lie. So Lucifer lost his mind, and all Satan was made by God, and all that God creates is good. But he lost his mind and sought to dethrone God and start his own angelic rebellion. He was cursed once again. And because free will, by the way, when you give somebody the free will, that's neither good or evil. What it really is a perfect gift, but it's sort of amoral in a sense. It's not really right or wrong. It's what you do with it. So when people say that God was responsible for evil, no. Whoever he gives free will to, they are responsible in how they exercise that freedom. And once you get that gift, you either exercise it rightly or wrongly. Same thing for humans as that with angels. In any event, let's see, he was cursed once he utilized his free will wrongly, but humanity was not cursed in that sense, since man is made in his image. We are made in God's image. Yes, we were cursed. We suffer from the fall. The whole universe again is fallen. But here's what you have to remember. I believe angels are a little jealous, especially the demons. Not good angels, it would be a sin. But demons, they know they weren't created in the image of God. And remember, there's a passage in the New Testament where we will rule over angels. Think about that. So that is hardcore. They were not created in the image of God, the imago Dei, but we are. So I think there's some jealousy there in the realm of spiritual warfare. Now, the fact that he was a created angel tells us that he is neither a divine being nor is he co-equal with God. Just like I mentioned earlier, if God could create a second God, that would not be his co-equal, because the second God would be dependent on his very existence on God having created him. So he would be dependent or contingent. Same thing with angels and anything that God has created. At the bottom of slide 107, again, as Paul said in Ephesians, we need to know the Word of God. It is our defense, Ephesians 6. We saw the same when Jesus and Satan were dueling back and forth on the pinnacle of the Herodian temple. And if you remember there, Jesus throws out Scripture, Satan throws out Scripture, and finally, you got the sword of the Spirit there, and finally, Satan flees. The best thing to do if you're facing spiritual warfare is A, go see your pastor. B, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you just feel like there's weirdness going on, and you haven't lost your mind, turn on the lights and start reading the Scriptures. They hate the Scriptures. They hate it. Turn on get a Bible series, not commentary, where the Word of God is just read read in your room to you. They hate it. They'll take off. It's sort of like this. Don't show up at Nick's house, because when we do, he starts walking around reading the Bible. One of those things, and they don't need to hear it. Read about their judgment that's coming. Whatever the word says, stick with it. All right, Genesis 3, verses 10 through 14. He answered, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. So you've already read that. Let's develop some of these verses. Adam blames Eve, of course, and Eve blames the serpent. Neither of them step up and take full responsibility. Notice here that there was only one rule. Don't eat of this one tree, but you can eat from all the others. This is one of those where you walk around a construction zone and you see caution tape. It says don't touch, or fresh paint, or do not trespass. Don't touch this grass. Well, there's something in man. We just want to rub that, see if it's dry, even though it says don't touch. Right? Do not trespass. Don't step on this grass. And you see that, you just have that in you that you want to step on it. Same thing here. But here's the bottom line. Every courthouse needs at least one rule. There was only one rule. Don't eat of that tree. Eat of all of these. What do? They go down and eat of the tree that he told them not to eat from. So this is one act of human rebellion that we can call the first act of what we call Christian ethics is coming up. I just put that on Populi. I'll be teaching that in the fall. I think module 1, unless they change it. In philosophy, we're going to talk about some of these things. Same thing in Christian ethics. There's what's called antinomianism. Antinomianism. Nomos means law. Anti is against or without law. So in my view, this act of rebellion in the Garden of Eden is what we could call the first act of antinomianism. No lawism. We don't want anything to do with that one law. There was no Mosaic law. There were no Ten Commandments. There was only one law. So they're antinomians at this point. Rather than doing it God's way, they're going to do it Sinatra's way. I'm going to do it my way. Eve decided to do it her own way, and this is precisely how we as human beings tend to operate, at least when we're in sin. So once we turn our lives over to Jesus, we seek and strive to line up our will. We want to line up our will with His will. That should be the chief aim of Christian living. And so often we fall short. I know that. Ask for mercy. We beg for grace. Know this, though. God foreknows everything. He knows everything in one instantaneous now. So when you blow it, when you sin, you make a mistake, whether it's intentional or unintentional, the intentional ones, I believe, are worse. It's sort of like they say sin is missing the mark of perfection. Well, that's one way of putting it. There's more to missing the mark of perfection. There's also another type of sin, or what we do when we sin, is intentionally hitting bullseye on the mark. That type of rebellion. I'm going to do this anyway. I'm saved, God has forgiven me, so intentionally I'm going to pick up a dart and I'm going to hit bullseye. So it's not just missing the mark of perfection, it's intentionally hitting the mark, bullseye on the dartboard. So keep that in mind. But the point is, when we're beating ourselves up and we feel the guilt, or the Holy Spirit is trying to bring us to the foot of the cross, know this, it's not like God is up there going, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did this. As if your sin surprised Him. You can't surprise God. You can't please Him in that sense that He's bummed out or let down and He's just, I can't believe you did this, Nick. I expected so much more from you. That would not make Him omniscient. So rest in that. You can't surprise Him. He knows what you're going to do in 2.5 weeks. That does not mean we test His grace and play with fire. He knows that as well. But if we continue to test His grace and play with fire and so forth, yes, He's patient, He's just, He's loving, and so forth. But He's also intolerant of sin. So He foreknows what sins we're going to commit. And of course, one of the things we don't like is we will reap what we sow. But you're not going to surprise Him in that sense. You're not going to really let Him down. Yeah, it grieves His heart, so to speak, when He sees or observes the act being committed in the here and now, whatever that sin is. Of course, He's perfect. But it's not like He's surprised or dumbfounded, because if He were, that means God would be learning. And He can't learn if He already is omniscient. Some of these videos here towards the end are going to be a little lengthy. I want to make sure we're doing all right. All right, we're 24 minutes into this one. By the way, I apologize. Genesis, you can't do it in 15-minute videos, 10 of them or 20, and call it a day. And I don't want to steal your time in just being too vague or too outline-ish, if you will. So let's just get through it. All right, having talked about that, let's move on to slide 110, where we're at Genesis 3:15 through 16. You have here, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. Interesting. You have a messianic prophecy. Liz asked me about that. I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing, and with pain you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. All right, what does all this stuff mean? Slide 111. At first, Eve lost her battle. She lost her battle in Eden, yet there will be an immediate enmity between her and the serpent, which is Satan. Lucifer is on the losing side of the battle between the seed of the woman. So even though she lost, there's a seed of the woman and himself. But women don't carry seeds. They have eggs. So what does that mean? This is not merely about hostility or fearing serpents, as some commentators say. Those who explain away that it has nothing to do with Jesus Christ are like saying, no, it's just that women are afraid of snakes. You got to be kidding me. That's theology? I don't think so. There's a battle going on with the enemy of the soul of man. Women don't carry seeds, yet we have the promise of a child, this descendant coming directly from Eve, and you see that in the genealogy of Luke 1. The Messiah, the Mashiach, will defeat and conquer that old serpent, the serpent of old. This is the first prophecy, again, concerning Isaiah chapter 6:13. You can look at Isaiah 6:13, the Messianic conquering of Satan. So in Mary, the Virgin Mary, a seed was placed miraculously by the Holy Spirit, as the Holy Spirit overshadowed Mary. And this is what we call the good news. The good news, as first stated here, is that Satan will lose the battle and be crushed by Christ on the cross. That's the crushing of his head. This passage has been labeled as the proto-evangelium. The proto-evangelium, in that it is the first gospel or good news, gospel announcement in the Torah, or the first book of Genesis that Moses penned down. So good news is the seed, that the woman will win the battle. And isn't that nice? You know, she makes a mistake, she blows it, they're antinomians. Adam runs up and says, sure, let's make apple pie. I don't care, cut down the tree. Let's bring them all home. Let's open an apple store. You know, they're just nuts in their own way here. And then after she loses that battle, God immediately steps in and says, it's not going to be so. There's going to be a messianic prophecy here. I'm going to clean up your mess, Eve, and you too, Adam. Adam, I believe, is twice as guilty. She was deceived. He wasn't. So, if you're a woman watching this, Adam was worse. He just rolled with it, maybe trying to please her because of her beauty. Maybe she stumbled him in that sense, but he was intentionally going sideways. She was deceived. Slide 112. You have more notes here on Eve. As for Eve and her role as mother, we can draw 2 points. One, her role as a wife, which is in verse 16. And number 2, her role as a mother, which is also in the latter portion of verse 16. Notice also that in Genesis 1, both man and woman were to rule together jointly. In chapter 3, because of her disobedience and being deceived, the male rules over the female. There are 3 offices that God has established as a side point. 3 offices within the earthly realm. You have number 1, the family. Number 2, you have the church. Number 3, you have the government. And we studied that in ethics too. You have the family, the church, and the government, not the other way around. Man over woman, what does that mean? Does this mean that we are superior ontologically, we're created better, and so forth? No. This superiority is only one of rank, you know, or role, if you will. Both male and female as I mentioned before, are ontologically the same, although there's a difference in role and function. As for the word desire, the same word is used of sin's desire to have Cain. That's the word desire, used and applied to Eve in this passage. We cannot be dogmatic as to what this truly means. You know, you will desire your husband. What exactly does that mean? A few questions remain. One, it may be that Eve's desire for Adam is normal, or maybe the desire she has now is not normal. Two, it may refer to Eve's desire for domination. Maybe she wants to have somebody over her. I once heard a tape or something from a women's retreat, and the pastor's wife was sharing, and she said something, I'm glad he's the one out there doing the work. Well, obviously, she doesn't want to drive a bulldozer, you know, be a firefighter and so forth. There are women that want that as well. And you know what? If you're 5'2", 140 pounds, I don't want you to pick me up. I'm 195 pounds and walk me down a 2-story ladder. No, you probably have to say that to Bob. Same thing as the construction workers, you know. Women driving bulldozers, that's fine. But what about a jackhammer? You know, they're physically, they're not built for that. That doesn't make them less at all. Ontologically, we're all part of humanness. So there's difference in role versus role and function, if you will. Yet there's a sameness there. So anyway, the pastor's wife was saying, you know, maybe this specific point here, it may refer to Eve's desire for domination in that, yeah, you know what? I just want you to be sort of like higher in rank than me. Not sure. I'm not going to speculate anymore. That's just what some commentators and theologians have said. We're now in Genesis 3:17 through 24. As for the notes there, we have it wasn't just Eve that was to experience pain. Remember in child rearing or in childbirth? Well, even so in child rearing, right? Because in sin, my mother conceived me. All right? So the same was the case with Adam. Life and work will not be easy. Although this probably does not come close to delivering a child, right? You know, say the roofers are up there, 30 degrees hotter on a roof, and they're up there laying shingles, you know, in the middle of August in the Inland Empire. That's hard work, but doesn't get close to delivering a child. Yet delivery is monetary. Work and life is lifelong, typically, right? So why would God do this to our first parents? Why? At first, they walked with God in perfection, but have now entered a life of imperfection apart from God. Why would separated people ever see the need for God in their lives? It may be that God intended for this, you know, for things to not be too easy for us, or so easy, in order for us to call out to Him, and in doing so, we can reestablish our relationship with God. Got to deal with the sin thing, and ask for forgiveness and be redeemed through the blood of Jesus. While sin separates us from God, God has done everything possible to reconcile the relationship that was lost in the garden. You know, a brief overview. You got Genesis, He creates everything, and it's beautiful. Man comes on the scene, and it's just game over. It's just a fallen world. Then God says, all right, I'm going to send you prophets. What do we do to the prophets? We kill them. We cut them in two. We cut them in half. You know, we bury them alive, whatever. And then finally, after I send you all these prophets, I'm going to send you my son. What do you do to him? Slap him up on a wooden Roman cross? Well, I'll tell you what. That's it. Redemption has been met. Next time I'm coming with the sword out of my mouth, and I will judge the entire planet. There you got Bible 101 in 30 seconds. That's essentially what He's doing. But He foreknew this before He even said, in the beginning, God, let there be light. You know, before He created anything, He knew this plan of redemption is what had to take place once He launched the creation of the world. All right, you have Cain and Abel in Genesis 4. So Cain was the first son, and Abel was the second. This is, of course, the first murder in human history. Cain kills his brother Abel. It's interesting that following man's disobedience in garden, once Adam and Eve went wrong, murder occurred shortly thereafter. From here on out, man plunges into sinful lives. In fact, in 3 chapters later, you see God floods the planet due to man's evil. We do know that Abel was the righteous brother and Cain was evil. At the get-go, it seems tragic. um, that the seed that is to conquer Satan comes from Cain. Hope arises later on when Seth is born. So why did God not accept Cain's offering, though? Why did he accept Abel's? Well, it's not that God elevates the herdsman, which would be Abel, over the farmer, which is Cain. It was the fact that Cain offered his firstborn of his flock. Later on in Leviticus, you see that the firstborn offering serves as a peace offering, and the fruit offering serves as an offering of consecration. I'll say that again. In Leviticus, also penned down by Moses, we see that the firstborn that you see Abel giving to God serves as a peace offering, and the fruit, from the farmer is that of a consecration offering. So in all, Abel's heart was fully in tune with the Lord. On the other hand, based on Cain killing his brother, that just screams jealousy as a sin-driven heart. If Cain's heart was in the right place, he most likely would not have killed his brother. And you look in John 3:12, actually 1 John chapter 3, verse 12. Finally, Cain tries to pull a fast one on God. Am I my brother's keeper? Sarcastically, suggesting that he had nothing to do with the death of his brother. Bear in mind that this is a lie, direct lie to the Most High. Concerning his blood, crying out from the ground. What is that? Is that a metaphor? Well, we can deduce at least that just as sin will distance a person from God, the same is true of the natural. In short, the phrase, the innocent victim is crying out for justice, can be said figuratively about Abel as well. Okay, Genesis 14, verse 13 through 18 is on slide 117. A brief summary. Slide 118, Cain's sentence. He's going to be a fugitive for the whole world to see, or for all to see. Wherever he goes. Cain certainly recognized the severity of this judgment. For as long as he lives, he will be alienated from the human community. God wanted this lesson to be learned by all. If anyone sought to kill Cain, God promised a sevenfold sentence on that person. Being marked, so to speak, by God, it's not clear to us exactly what that is, but it clearly appears to be a physical one where others can see. The sad reality of his sin can be compared to his parents. Just like Adam and Eve were evicted from Eden, Cain now must move away, which includes him being distant from the presence of the Lord and his parents. He moves eastward of the garden toward Nod, and Nod, N-O-D, means wandering. I don't know if you saw Noah's Ark that recently hit the movie screens. We see Cain entering the boat. Absolutely ridiculous. That is not in the scriptures. In any event, what about Cain? Where did he get his wife? The atheist or critic thinks this question is so profound, like no one has thought about it ever. It is argued that if Abel is now dead, there would only be Cain and his mother and father left. So where did he get his wife? Well, Cain most likely married his sister, probably a niece of a sort. There was no law against this practice until way later in Leviticus 18, verse 9. There was only one rule in the Garden of Eden: don't eat of this tree. So some scholars have argued that the human DNA would not have been as corrupted as it is today. If incest or whatnot, these terrible things occur today, where you're going to end up having kids suffering mental deficiencies. You might even have severe cases of retardation and other mental illnesses, because we're just not supposed to do that. Having said that, some scholars argue that the human DNA would not have been as corrupted as it is today back then. So thus future or a distorted offspring with birth defects would be highly unlikely back then, but today they are very, very likely. In all, you got to remember this: we are all related to our first parents. Yes, you're watching this, you are my brother, you are my sister, and vice versa. Well, I couldn't be your sister, but you know what I'm saying. So we're all related to our first parents. I don't care what ethnic group you come from. We're all related. We're all created in the image of God. And for the Darwinist, that might sound ridiculous, but let me tell you this. No matter what worldview is true, let's say Judeo-Christian theism is false, and let's say Darwinian evolution is true, we still have a first parent. We must have a first parent somewhere. So for theists of our persuasion, say, well, our first parents, our ancestry is Adam and Eve. Who is yours? An amphibian? Well, you still have a first parent of a sort. Well, come from somewhere. Finally, Genesis 5:5, we read here that Adam, this is about now Cain having a wife, Adam begat sons and daughters. Given that Adam lived, for some 930 years, this would be a sufficient time to produce many sons and daughters and nieces and cousins and so forth. I mean, some countries today you can still marry your cousin. And in America, thinks that's nasty, that's gross. But if it's a cousin and not a sister, it's okay because chances of corruption there, human DNA is less, whatever. That's what they argue. All right, Genesis 4:19 through 26. Polygamy, again, many wives, is first mentioned here. The first occurrence. So on slide 121, God gave Adam and Eve a replacement son. Seth means appointed or granted. And you bet that God answered Eve's prayer and granted her another son. We see a fascinating religious awakening here at this time. At that time when men began to call on the name of the Lord, the word Lord here is singular and stresses monotheism, as opposed to the widespread belief that all of ancient religion was polytheistic or pantheistic. So very early here, you got monotheism. It's not monotheism deriving or borrowing from polytheism. No, one of the oldest religions right here is monotheism. Seth seemed to have lived up to his mother's expectations. So from Adam to Noah, you have genealogy in Genesis 5. I'm not going to read through that. You have a lot of crazy names there. One verse that sticks out, of course, is in Genesis 5, verse 22. And after he became the father of Methuselah, by the way, he lived the longest in the Bible, Enoch walked with God and had other sons and daughters. That phrase there, Enoch walked with God, I've highlighted it red, because we need to walk with God as well. I believe that the ages of these people, I mentioned this before in Genesis 1:2, are to be taken at face value. So, just so you've heard it, some have postulated that their age is symbolic or maybe connected to astrological periods, or somehow the age implies some unknown honorary code applied to the person, or that it might be divided by factor 5, all this strange stuff. I take it at face value. There are other ancient Near East civilizations outside of the Bible that also record long ages, even 38,000 years plus. You have that of the Sumerian king. However, or one of the kings, due to the changing of the cosmology of our universe as it was cursed and fallen, number one, after the fall of creation and onward, two, given entropy, loss of thermodynamics, three, how the ages of people dropped after Noah's flood, I see no problem in accepting these ages as literal. As for the genealogy, you have here in Genesis 5, verses 1 through 32, concerns the single line of Adam's descendants all the way up to the time of Noah, in only naming one person for each generation. In chapter 5, verse 3, starts off with Adam and moves towards Seth, Adam's third son, because the other one was killed. In 7 generations, Cain's line leads to another killer, who is Lamech. Whereas Seth's lineage, in 7 generations, leads to Enoch, who walked with God. Walked with God again suggests a continued intimacy with the Lord, and we must strive to do the same, to shun evil and try to do good to the best of our capability, help with the Holy Spirit, while we also try to flee the very appearance of evil. Think about that, flee the appearance of evil. Even the appearance. It's not evil yet. Flee the appearance of evil. Enoch was the first man who never faced death, but God instead took him. This might be a precursor, according to some theologians, to the rapture. In contrast, Methuselah, I said earlier, he's the oldest guy in the Bible, lived 969 years, possibly died in the year of the coming flood. All right, then we have the flood in Genesis 6, and I will pick that up in our next session. And I know this was a lot of information. They're going to be just as long till we get through the book here in the next couple of weeks. I will see you in our next session. Lord bless.